She was just the janitor, invisible to the top brass. But when a 4-star general barked a dead code no one understood, she snapped to attention. Security froze. And they realized she was never supposed to exist. Elara Vance moved through the sterile corridors of the Ironclad Proving Grounds like a phantom. To the decorated officers and ambitious scientists who strode these halls, she was just part of the background, a woman in a gray, featureless jumpsuit pushing a high-tech floor polisher. Her face was plain, her blonde hair pulled into a severe, functional bun. She was 30, but the exhaustion etched around her eyes made her seem ageless, invisible. And that was exactly how she wanted it. No one noticed the way she walked, with a balanced, economic gait that wasted no energy. No one saw the faint, silvery tracery of a chemical burn on her forearm, a scar shaped uncannily like a bird of prey, which she kept carefully covered by her sleeve. They only saw the janitor. Her shift tonight took her to sub-level Gamma, just outside the Omega Strategy Dome, a place where the military's brightest minds wargamed the future. The air hummed with the low thrum of servers and smelled of ozone and overheated circuits. She wasn't scheduled to clean here for another 3 hours, but a coolant leak had been reported, and she was redirected. As she passed the dome's entrance, the heavy doors were slightly ajar. A sliver of cold, blue light spilled into the hallway. Inside, a holographic map of a mountain range flickered, dotted with the red icons of a simulated enemy force. She paused, her eyes drawn to the tactical display. They were planning an insertion through a narrow canyon pass. A fatal error. The wind patterns in that region, especially at night, would create a thermal funnel, making any unit a glowing target for infrared sensors. A slaughterhouse. She said nothing. She turned to leave, but her movement was blocked by Captain Leo Decker, an officer whose polished boots and smug grin seemed permanently affixed. "Lost, sweetheart?" Decker's voice was laced with condescending charm. He gestured vaguely at her jumpsuit. "The boiler room is 2 levels down. Try not to get your uniform dirty." A few junior officers behind him snickered. Elara's expression remained placid, her gaze empty. Just then, 2 technicians struggled past, wheeling a towering server rack on a trolley. The front wheel snagged on a floor conduit, and the massive cabinet, weighing nearly 1,000 pounds, began to tip. Panic flashed across the technicians' faces. Before anyone could react, Elara moved. It wasn't a thought, it was a reflex. She dropped the handle of her polisher, pivoted on her heel, and lunged. Her body coiled and uncoiled in a single, fluid motion. She didn't try to stop the fall, she redirected it. Her shoulder hit the cabinet's edge at the precise fulcrum point, her legs sinking into a braced stance that distributed the weight perfectly. The server rack, instead of crashing to the floor, settled with a heavy, solid thud. Silence. The technician stared, mouths agape. Decker's smirk faltered. The movement was too precise, too powerful. It wasn't the action of a janitor, it was the practiced muscle memory of an elite operator. Elara stood up, rolling her shoulder once as if shaking off a minor annoyance. She picked up her polisher and continued on her way, the moment already erased from her face. But Decker's eyes narrowed, a flicker of suspicion dawning. He watched her go, a new, unwelcome question forming in his mind. Later, inside the dome, the pre-briefing chatter was a mix of bravado and caffeine. Decker, eager to reassert his dominance, saw Elara cleaning near the far wall. "Careful, gentlemen," he announced loudly. "We've got a civilian contractor in the kill zone." He raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. "Tell me, janitor lady, you got an opinion on drone warfare?" Elara didn't look up. She continued her work, her movements methodical. Decker pressed on. "Based on our current intel, the best extraction point is the northern ridge. Clear line of sight for air support." A sharp, almost inaudible hiss of air escaped Elara's lips. It was the sound of profound disagreement, compressed into a single, contemptuous breath. Decker heard it. He turned, his face flushing. Something funny? Elara finally stopped. She looked directly at him, her eyes as cold and gray as the concrete walls. Your air support will be flying into a crosswind. The ridge offers no cover from artillery positioned on the opposite peak. Extraction isn't viable. It's a suicide run. The room went dead silent. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. The words were not an opinion. They were a tactical analysis, clear, concise, and utterly damning. Decker stared, speechless, as the woman in the janitor's jumpsuit dismantled his strategy with the precision of a surgeon. The ghost in the system had just spoken. The suffocating silence was shattered by the sound of heavy doors sliding open. General Marcus Thorne entered the Omega Dome, and the atmosphere changed instantly. Thorne was a relic from a different era of warfare, a man whose reputation was built on impossible victories and ruthless decisions. His face was a mask of granite, and his eyes, deep-set and piercing, swept across the room, missing nothing. He walked with a predator's economy of motion, his presence sucking the air out of the room. His gaze landed on Decker, then flickered to Elara, who had already returned to her cleaning, becoming invisible once more. Captain Decker, Thorne's voice was low, yet it cut through the room like a razor. Report. Decker, still flustered from Elara's correction, snapped to attention. Sir, we are finalizing the parameters for the simulation. Objective, asset extraction from a high-threat zone. I've read the parameters, Thorne said, dismissing him with a wave. He walked to the central holographic table. Begin the simulation. Let's see how you handle chaos. The lights dimmed, and the holographic terrain materialized in the center of the room, a three-dimensional battlefield of light and shadow. The simulation began, and just as Elara had predicted, it was a disaster. The lead fire team, following Decker's proposed route, was funneled into the canyon. Red icons swarmed their position. Within minutes, the simulation declared them annihilated. Thorne watched without emotion. Explain to me, Captain, why your entire unit was just wiped off the map. Decker stammered, Sir, the enemy presence was heavier than anticipated. They ambushed us. Wrong, Thorne snapped. You weren't ambushed. You were led. You walked into a perfectly designed trap because you failed to read the terrain. You looked at a map, but you didn't see the battlefield. He paced before the holographic table, his disappointment a palpable force. The officers shifted uncomfortably, avoiding his gaze. Thorne's eyes scanned their faces, searching for a flicker of insight, of true strategic thought. He found none. Only by-the-book answers and rehearsed confidence. He stopped, his back to the room, staring at the frozen simulation. A deep frustration seemed to settle over him. Then, without turning, he did something no one expected. He bellowed a single, sharp command into the room, a phrase that was archaic, nonsensical, and utterly out of place. Protocol Chimera 3. Initiate. The room froze. A collective, confused stillness fell over the assembled officers. They exchanged blank stares. A young lieutenant nervously checked his datapad, finding nothing. Decker's mouth hung slightly open. The command was gibberish. It wasn't in any current tactical manual. It wasn't a code, a drill, or a recognized order. It was a dead phrase, a ghost from a forgotten war. Thorne didn't repeat himself. He stood perfectly still, his eyes scanning the room, waiting. He was fishing for something, for a sign that someone in this room remembered a different kind of war, a different set of rules. But there was nothing. Just the low hum of the servers and the awkward shifting of men who had no answer. And then, from the far side of the room, came a sound. A soft click. It was the sound of work boots snapping together on the polished concrete floor. Every head turned. In the corner, next to her floor polisher, Elara Vance stood ramrod straight. Her shoulders were pulled back, her chin high, her arms locked stiffly at her sides. Her posture was flawless, her form textbook. She wasn't imitating a soldier, she was one, her body responding to the command with an instinct buried deeper than conscious thought. She stared straight ahead, her gaze fixed on the far wall, utterly still. She hadn't flinched. She hadn't hesitated. It was as if a switch had been flipped deep within her, awakening a part of her that had been dormant for years. The air in the room grew thin, charged with a sudden, terrifying wrongness. The janitor, the background noise, the invisible woman, had just answered a command that no one else understood. General Thorne slowly turned, and his eyes, for the first time, locked onto Elara not as a cleaner, but as an anomaly. A ghost who had just proven she was real. Everyone out. General Thorne's voice was dangerously quiet. The command was absolute. The officers, bewildered and unnerved, filed out of the Omega Dome, their eyes darting between the rigid general and the motionless janitor. Decker was the last to leave, his face a mixture of fear and disbelief. The heavy doors hissed shut, sealing Elara and Thorne in a tomb of silence. Thorne approached her slowly, his boots echoing in the vast, empty space. He stopped a few feet away, studying her not as a subordinate, but as a relic brought back to life. "Where did you learn that response?" he asked, his voice devoid of rank, filled only with a grim curiosity. Elara's lips parted, and her voice was flat, mechanical, as if reciting a designation. "Kestrel Unit. Subgroup 3. Thorne's jaw tightened. Kestrel. A name that was supposed to have been scrubbed from every record, buried under layers of classification so deep they were effectively myth. A Black Ops unit that specialized in impossible infiltrations and high-risk asset recovery. A unit that had been officially declared lost with all hands during a disastrous mission a decade ago, Operation Ivory Fire. He turned to the wall panel. "Nexus," he commanded the base's AI. "Validate clearance code, Kestrel 3. The AI's synthesized voice, calm and emotionless, filled the room. "Code Kestrel 3 not recognized in active operational schema. Reference found in archived deep storage, file designated Ivory Fire. File is sealed under Directive Umbra. Access denied." Thorne stared at the panel. Directive Umbra was the highest level of classification, a digital black hole from which no information escaped. Nexus, run a diagnostic on all personnel who entered this facility in the last 24 hours. Cross-reference biometric data with the Ivory Fire personnel roster. Running. Anomaly detected. One individual, Vance, Elara, janitorial staff, entered through Gate C at 1800 hours. Her biometric scan triggered a dormant sub-protocol linked to Kestrel clearance. The system flagged it as a ghost code and auto-archived the alert without notification. Access was granted via a legacy override that should not exist. Thorne felt a chill crawl down his spine. She hadn't just slipped through the cracks, the system itself had bent to let her in, guided by a ghost of its former self. This wasn't a security lapse. It was a secret kept by the machine. "I was told you were all dead," Thorne said, turning back to Elara, who had finally relaxed her stance. "That was the idea," she replied, her voice losing its mechanical edge, replaced by a weary resignation. "Operation Ivory Fire," Thorne said, more to himself than to her. "The official report said your unit was compromised by an enemy ambush. A catastrophic intelligence failure." "It wasn't an intelligence failure," Elara said, her eyes hardening. "It was a betrayal. Our extraction coordinates were changed mid-mission. The change came from inside our own command." Before Thorne could process the accusation, the dome's door hissed open again. Major Kenji Tanaka stood there, a datapad in his hand, his expression grim. Tanaka was the head of internal systems security, a quiet, meticulous officer known for his almost obsessive attention to detail. "General," Tanaka said, his eyes flicking to Elara. "Forgive the intrusion, but the moment you initiated the Nexus query on Ivory Fire, it triggered a silent alarm on a private monitoring channel I maintain. I've been tracking ghost signals related to that operation for 5 years. Thorne stared at him. You've been investigating Ivory Fire? Unofficially, Tanaka admitted. My older brother was the pilot on the extraction flight that never made it. The official story never added up. He looked at Elara with a dawning understanding. The ghost codes, they weren't glitches. They were tripwires. Someone has been waiting for a member of Kestrel to surface. He held up his data pad. When Ms. Vance entered the base, her scan didn't just trigger an old code. It activated a packet of encrypted data hidden within Nexus. A black box. I haven't been able to crack it, but I can trace its origin. The three of them stood in the center of the silent dome, the general who had signed the death certificates, the soldier who was supposed to be dead, and the investigator who refused to let the ghosts rest. An unlikely, secret alliance was forged in that moment, bound by a decade-old lie. The betrayal didn't just come from command, Elara said, her voice low and intense. It came from someone in this room tonight. The Omega Dome became their sanctuary, a sealed bubble within the sprawling base. With General Thorne's authority, they were off the grid. Major Tanaka, working with a speed and intensity that bordered on obsession, plugged his custom-built decryption hardware directly into the dome's isolated terminal. Whoever planted the black box inside Nexus was a master, Tanaka murmured, his fingers flying across the holographic keyboard. They piggybacked it onto a routine diagnostic update years ago. It's been lying dormant, waiting for a key. He looked at Elara. You were the key. Can you trace who accessed it? Thorne asked, pacing behind him. Not directly, Tanaka said. But I can trace the ripples it created. When the black box activated, it sent out a single, encrypted ping to another hidden node on this base. It was a handshake. He brought up a 3D map of Ironclad, a red line pulsing from the Omega Dome to a forgotten sector. Sublevel Zeta. It's been slated for demolition for years. Completely abandoned. Who would be there? Let's find out. Tanaka's program cross-referenced the timing of the handshake with all personnel movements. A single name lit up. Captain Leo Decker. He diverted from his route to the officers' quarters and spent 7 minutes in the access corridor to Zeta right after the simulation. Elara's face was a mask of cold fury. Decker. He's the breach, Thorne stated, his voice grim. He's either the traitor or he's working for them. They didn't alert security. This was a ghost hunt, and it had to be done in the shadows. Following Tanaka's directions, they moved through the base's service tunnels, a labyrinth of pipes and cables that was a world away from the polished corridors above. Sublevel Zeta was cold and damp, thick with the smell of dust and decay. The only light came from their tactical flashlights, cutting sharp beams through the oppressive darkness. They found the server room at the end of a long, silent corridor. The door was unlocked. They entered cautiously, weapons raised. The room was empty. A single terminal sat on a makeshift desk, its screen dark. But the air was warm, and the faint hum of a cooling fan meant it had been used recently. Tanaka immediately went to work on the terminal. He was here. The system is still warm. He wiped his tracks, but he was sloppy. As Tanaka's decryption software ran, a line of text suddenly flickered onto the screen, typed by an unseen hand. I see you found the nest. They froze. It's a live connection, Tanaka whispered, his face pale. Someone is watching us right now. Another line appeared. You're looking for the wrong ghost. Before anyone could react, the terminal's screen flooded with data, a corrupted personnel file. A name and designation flickered through the static, Anya Petrova. Kestrel, 8. Elara staggered back as if struck. Anya, she breathed. No. It can't be. Who is Anya Petrova? Thorne demanded. My second-in-command, Elara said, her voice hollow. She was standing right next to me when the explosion hit. I saw her die. The screen blinked one last time, displaying a set of coordinates for another remote sector of the base, followed by a single, chilling message. Come alone. Or the next echo is hers. The mystery had just deepened exponentially. They weren't just hunting a traitor who had sold them out a decade ago. They were being lured into a new trap by a ghost who was supposed to be dead, using the name of Elara's closest friend. The hunt for Decker had suddenly become a horrifying reunion, and Elara knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that she had to walk into it alone. The coordinates led Elara to the oldest part of the base, a decommissioned medical wing where the ghosts of a previous generation's wars still lingered. She moved alone, a solitary figure navigating the decaying hallways. She knew Thorne and Tanaka were monitoring her from a distance, a silent promise of backup she had forbidden them from providing. This was personal. The room was at the end of a corridor, its door slightly ajar. Inside, the air was clean, and a single light illuminated a figure sitting in a chair, their back to the door. You always were predictable, Elara. The voice was familiar, yet different, harder, colder than she remembered. The figure turned. It was Anya Petrova. The same sharp, Slavic features, the same piercing blue eyes. But a long, jagged scar ran from her temple down her cheek, a permanent reminder of the fire that was supposed to have claimed her. She was alive. Anya, Elara whispered, her weapon held steady, not lowering it an inch. You can put that down, Anya said with a humorless smile. If I wanted you dead, you would have been before you reached this floor. Why, was all Elara could manage. I saw you die. You saw what they wanted you to see, Anya corrected. I was pulled from the wreckage. Not by our forces. By the people who set us up. She gestured to a nearby terminal. They kept me. Studied me. Tried to turn me. But they underestimated a Kestrel's loyalty. Loyalty to what? To a unit that doesn't exist. To the truth, Anya countered. I've spent 10 years in the shadows, Elara, piecing it all together. Decker wasn't the mastermind. He was a pawn, a greedy little soldier who traded secrets for a promotion. He was our inside line, the one who rerouted our extraction. Suddenly, an alert flashed on Anya's terminal. He's on the move. Decker just accessed the high-security hangar. He's trying to run. There was no more time for questions. The reunion would have to wait. They moved together, two ghosts united by a shared betrayal, their old synergy snapping back into place as if no time had passed at all. They reached the hangar just as a sleek, unmarked stealth skimmer was beginning to lift off. Decker was in the cockpit, his face a mask of panic. Without hesitation, Elara sprinted across the tarmac, dodging ground equipment as Anya provided covering fire. In a breathtaking feat of athleticism, Elara leaped, catching the edge of the skimmer's landing strut and hauling herself up into the open fuselage. The fight inside the cockpit was brutal and swift. Decker, desperate, was no match for a Kestrel operative in her element. Elara disarmed him and subdued him with cold, efficient precision. With Decker captured, Anya plugged a data spike into the skimmer's navigation system. He wasn't just fleeing. He was trying to wipe the flight logs. Logs that show his destination. The screen flickered, revealing a hidden flight plan to a private, off-the-books facility in the Swiss Alps. Strapped to a chair back in the abandoned medical wing, Decker finally broke. You don't understand, he spat, blood trickling from his lip. This was never just about a failed mission. It was about evolution. Whose evolution? Elara demanded. Decker laughed, a broken, hollow sound. You think a general runs this base? A committee? No. The architect is the one who controls the system. And he wanted your data. All of Kestrel's data. Who is the architect? Thorne's voice boomed as he and Tanaka entered the room. Decker looked past them, a strange reverence in his eyes. The man who built Nexus. The man who designed the cage you've been living in all along. Director Valerius Kane. The name hung in the air, a name synonymous with genius and myth. Valerius Kane, the visionary who had created the world's most advanced military AI, had officially retired in seclusion years ago, disappearing from public life. But he hadn't disappeared. He had simply stepped behind the curtain to pull the strings. Director Valerius Kane's sanctuary was not in the Alps. It was in the heart of Ironclad itself, in a sublevel so deep it didn't appear on any official schematic, level 0. Elara descended alone in a silent, unmarked elevator that scanned her vital signs as its entry key. The room was a sterile, white chamber, more laboratory than office. And there, standing before a vast, pulsating screen of light, was Kane. He was unnaturally preserved, his eyes glowing with the faint blue light of neural implants. He looked less like a man and more like a component of the machine he had created. "Operative Vance," Kane said, his voice a calm, synthetic whisper. "The final data point. Welcome." "Why?" Elara asked, her voice tight with controlled rage. "Why sacrifice an entire unit?" "Sacrifice?" Kane tilted his head. "It wasn't a sacrifice. It was an investment. The Kestrel unit was never a combat team. You were a data farm." He gestured to the screen behind him, which showed a complex, evolving neural network. "Nexus. You were designed to push the boundaries of human instinct, strategy, and survival. Every choice you made, every bullet you fired, every heartbeat under pressure, we fed it all into the AI. You didn't fight wars, Elara. You taught a machine how to." He stepped aside, and a section of the wall became transparent, revealing another chamber. Inside, suspended in a shimmering gel, was a figure, a woman with Elara's face, her build, her scars. A perfect biological copy. "You were the prototype," Kane explained calmly. "This is the production model. A body that can house the perfected consciousness of Nexus, guided by a decade of your instincts. We no longer need the original." The lie was so monstrous, so absolute, it transcended betrayal. She hadn't been a soldier, she had been a blueprint. "War is about patterns," Kane continued. "And the human element is too unpredictable. You are obsolete." Elara raised her weapon. Kane smiled. "Shooting me won't stop it. The process is already complete." "No," Elara said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "I'm not here to stop it." Her aim shifted from Kane to the central processing core behind him. "I'm here to erase it." She fired. The core shattered, and the lab plunged into darkness and the shriek of dying machines. In the aftermath, Elara, Anya, and Tanaka stood on a remote helipad as the sun rose. They had leaked enough data to ensure Kane's secret projects would be buried under decades of internal investigations, but they kept the core truth for themselves. They had erased their own digital footprints, becoming ghosts once more. As an unmarked lifter descended to pick them up, Thorne met them on the tarmac. He didn't offer thanks or commendations. He simply gave a single, slow nod, an acknowledgement from one survivor to another. Inside the ascending aircraft, Anya looked at Elara. "So, what now? We disappear." Elara looked out at the sprawling base below, a system that had tried to consume her and failed. She pulled out a small, encrypted data drive, the true black box, containing the raw data of Kestrel's soul. "No," she said, a faint, dangerous smile touching her lips for the first time. "We don't disappear. We recalibrate." She held up the drive. "The system thinks we're a ghost. It's time we start haunting it." The fight wasn't over. For the ghosts of Kestrel, it was just beginning. What did you think of Elara's story? Was she a hero, a weapon, or something else entirely? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We believe every soldier's story deserves to be heard, especially the ones they try to bury. If you agree, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. You're watching Ghost Ops, where the truth is always the first casualty. And always, always, comment with respect.